We're going to start that right now. And we'll start with the man from Kentucky known as Benny Snell Jr., 1,304 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns. It's a very lackluster running back class compared to last year. And with Benny Snell Jr., you've got the speed, the vision, the lateral agility to execute cuts with precision. He's an effective downhill runner, knows how to attack the hole at the second level, can use his elusiveness to make linebackers miss. Carried a really weak Kentucky offense in 2018. Kentucky's left tackle suffered a season-ending injury, and he still got 1,000 rushing yards for the third year in a row. So his production as a running back is really, really good. Weaknesses, Benny Snell doesn't always have 100-yard games, but his pass protection and pass catching needs work. But even though he's very consistent, he will have a bad game from time to time. I think there's 5 teams in the market for running backs: the Bills, the Jets, the Raiders, the 49ers, and the Buccaneers. Those are the 5 NFL teams that could use immediate starting running backs. Then you got teams that could use situational backs, like the Atlanta Falcons, if they move on from Tevin Coleman and they don't trust Ito Smith. Carolina, if they move on from C.J. Anderson, Fozzie Whitaker, Jonathan Stewart, and they want to get a change of pace back to complement Christian McCaffrey. Dallas, if they want to change of pace back. That's what it's coming to. It's like, this is not a draft where you draft a Pro Bowl running back to anchor your backfield. This is a draft where if you need running back depth, you get a change of pace back to complement your backfield. Like the Eagles could use a change of pace back if Jay Ajayi leaves, because I don't trust Wendell Smallwood and Corey Clement with LeGarrette Blount gone. They might even need a new starting running back, so you could definitely make a case for the Eagles. The Colts have Jalen Samuel. They have
now, you have to remember
Marlon Mack, but they need a change of pace back.
Smallwood. Never trust Smallwood. Never turns out well.
Okay. So that's why the Eagles may as well draft a new running back. Never trust Smallwood.
Yeah, they trusted Smallwood and it failed. Just failed.
But is Benny Snell one of these teams, the Eagles, the Buccaneers, the Raiders, the Jets, or the Bills, have the luxury of taking the first round? I think the only one of those teams that could take a running back in the first round is maybe the Eagles, because you don't trust Smallwood. But I don't know if a team's going to reach for a running back in this draft when you've got a lot of guys like A.J. Dillon, Boston College, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Ohio State. When you got a lot of high-caliber running backs like that in the 2020 draft, I just don't see the point of reaching for a running back in this class in the first round when the next class is just going to be so much better. So I gave him an 89 grade.
Well,
I like this guy, but I don't.
I think the top couple of running backs have a lot of potential to be stars. But this is not a deep running back class. I think Snell is somebody I've liked for a couple years. Between the tackles, he's got the explosion, everything like you said. He doesn't catch the ball much. Doesn't catch it. You know, they don't throw it to him, he doesn't catch it. And he does need to work on his pass protection, but you say that, it's like every running back coming out of college has working on pass protection. He has very few that are actually really good pass protectors. So that doesn't worry me as much as he doesn't catch the ball part. Then too, Nick Chubb didn't catch the ball much in college, and he's turned into a pretty decent receiver out of the backfield. You know, it's a slow process. He's starting to turn into a pretty decent receiver. Caught 3 passes last week. So it's not unprecedented that somebody who doesn't catch passes in college can't turn into a pretty decent receiving running back. But I'm more, as a scout who watched Snell the last couple of years, I would look at him and say, okay, we need somebody who can run between the tackles with explosion. I want somebody like Snell. And that's something that I wish he had better vision. But as far as straight line running goes, he's probably the best in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I think as far as vision goes, he is one of the better running backs. He had 1,091 yards in 2016, 1,333 in 2017. I do like him, and the reason I made him running back 1 is because I do like Devin Singletary's tape more, but there are some issues with Devin Singletary that make him not as good as Benny Snell. Devin Singletary is 5'9", 200 pounds. Most running backs are 5'11". And Mark is a day 3 grade on Devin Singletary because he's 5'9". But he's already got 3 consecutive seasons with 1,000 rushing yards. But he struggled versus Oklahoma. He did not get a rushing touchdown versus Oklahoma. He only had 87 rushing yards, and that was Florida Atlantic's toughest opponent. And he had 22 rushing touchdowns this year and 32 last year. So Devin Singletary can score, but all of his scores came against weaker opponents. He's fast. He's superb in pass protection as well as running blocking. He cuts with precision, excellent at spinning with his runs on tape. He's natural at trucking defenders despite being 5'9". There is a lot I love about Devin Singletary, but he needs to show more as a pass catcher on tape. I think he could be a starting running back, but some teams are going to question his height. I think he has the highest ceiling outside of Benny Snell, of any running back in this class. And Singletary is a guy that we talked about last week. My friend Kyle Taylor, who covers the high school page, said this guy's a sleeper. Look out for Devin Singletary a month ago. So I went back, watched his tape. I saw his stats were eye-popping, 32 rushing touchdowns, 2017, 22 in 2018. Those numbers were too eye-popping for me to ignore. I popped in his tape versus Oklahoma. I wasn't impressed. I popped in his tape against another opponent. This guy blew me away on tape. So there's a lot I like about Devin Singletary, but there's also a lot he needs to work on. And I think he's someone who can be a very good change of pace back, but I also think he's capable of being an immediate starter in the right system, even if he falls to day 3 of the draft. I really like Devin Singletary. I think he's going to be a good pro, despite what Mark thinks. But Mark's one is usually right about the running backs. I'm usually wrong about the running backs. I thought Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara would be duds, and he was right. I also thought Todd Gurley would be an injury-prone bust, and I was wrong about that. So even though I'm good at quarterbacks, I'm awful with running backs. Like, I was right about Elliott and Barkley, but I've missed on a lot of running backs over the years. So Mark is better at evaluating running backs than I do, and Mark thinks Singletary's going to bust, but I think he's going to be good. So we'll see what happens. But Singletary's a player that caught my eye, which is why I put him at 2. You talked about Singletary last week. Anything you want to add?
I think Singletary has, he's got some things that you like better than some of the things Snell does, but I don't really think he and Snell are that similar running backs. At Snell, a lot of his strengths are things that Singletary needs to work on. A lot of Singletary's strengths are things Snell needs to work on. So I think it will, in a lot of ways, depend on who's kicking and what the scheme is. But I think Snell probably fits more schemes than Singletary does.
And Snell's resume is stronger. Snell had 100 yards against SEC opponents, whereas Singletary didn't. And he struggled versus Oklahoma. So I took that into account with my rankings as well.
Yeah.
Number 3 on my running back rankings is a guy from Iowa State that a lot of people in Lombardi's Draft Talk are hailing as running back 1. A lot of people in our Film and Friends group that Mark Jarvis, Waldo Rohren, our awesome Film and Friends team does, they think David Montgomery's running back 1. He only has 947 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns for Iowa State this season, but he even got ejected for like a fight. He missed part of a half. He's a north-south runner, good ball carrier vision, can be a power back or an elusive back. He runs with a lot of power. He's an excellent pass blocker, juke, stiff arms. He can run inside, outside, dominates in goal line situations. I think he needs to work on catching out of the backfield. It's hard to say where David Montgomery goes at this point in the draft process. He's capable of starting right away, but he may begin his career as a change of pace back. He doesn't have any threats. You could argue he's the safest running back in the class despite his limited ceiling. He's gotten into arguments, but I'm not putting any stock into that. But I am noting it as a potential threat if it carries on in the NFL. It could be a threat, but he hasn't been suspended. He got suspended for a half. He didn't get suspended for a full game. So it's a concern, but I wouldn't say it's a threat.
If you're looking at players to compare him to at the NFL level, one of the best comparisons I can give him is probably Leonard Fournette. Not that on a talent level, but style of play is similar. Big power back that, thumps pretty, will thump and thump and thump and wear you down. And while he isn't as skilled as Fournette, that's pretty much the type of player he is. So if I don't think he has the speed or the burst that Fournette does when he's in the open field. But, I mean, as far as the between the tackles stuff, that's what I look at him as. It's more of a Leonard Fournette type receiver.
Yep. And number 4 is Rodney Anderson. This is a guy who was listed in the top 10 on a lot of draft boards, but he suffered a season-ending injury. And Rodney Anderson, if Rodney Anderson didn't get injured, you could definitely argue he'd be the first running back in the draft. He might be a late first-rounder. He has the vision. He's elusive. He can run inside or outside. He's got to improve as a pass blocker, but that's really it. He can catch the ball to the backfield. He caught some passes from Baker Mayfield last year. I mean, this was a guy who had first-round grade heading into the preseason, but he suffered a knee injury, season-ending knee injury back in week 2. I have an 85 potential grade on it. But here's the thing with Rodney Anderson. He was a product of a very good offensive line and a very good quarterback at Oklahoma when he dominated last year. Can he rise above his supporting cast and make something of himself, or is he just a product of his supporting cast? I'm not saying he can't do it. He can. He's capable. Rodney Anderson's made some big plays on tape in the bowl game against Georgia last year. The bowl game where Dorsey got Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield. So,
well, here's the thing for me with him is the offensive line of Oklahoma is pretty much all of them that are draft eligible are probably going to be gone within the first 3 rounds. But at the same time, the big concern I have about Anderson is second-level burst. They're like, yeah, he gets his line, but does he burst after that to run away from people? I haven't really seen that as much. He can outrun bigger and slower guys, but if you get an NFL linebacker, they're going to be bigger, but good chance they're going to be faster too. So for me, his force, more specifically, is from about 10 yards to his 30 to 40 yards within that time frame. That's going to be important, as well as his 3-10 drill, because we're going to see how fast he can burst and how he takes those corners, how sharp he can get around those tackles. Those are 2 major questions that I have with Anderson. So, you know, his burst, both, I can even take that to when he reaches the line, because remember, running backs are 3 to 5 yards off the line. So you can basically just put it as a 10. You had to watch the 10-yard split, then you had to watch the full thing to see how he accelerates. Then you had to compare it to running backs from years past. Then the 3-10 drill, see how fast he gets around those corners. Because that's also about burst in the open field, which is the major concern. So those are things that you're going to have to really look at when it comes to Anderson, because he does not strike me as, well, he strikes me as good at everything, very good at a few things, and has a couple of question marks about burst and overall speed. So those things are what you're going to have to look at going forward for Anderson.
Yep. And number 5, Myles Gaskin of Washington. I think this guy's the dark horse of the draft, 5'10", 193. His issue was pass protection and pass blocking. He's corrected that, but he hasn't perfected that yet. And he's had a 2 consecutive 1,000-yard years without Trey Adams at left tackle. And what does Myles Gaskin do? He goes off versus Washington State. 170 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns in the Apple Cup. And I still think Myles Gaskin's a top 100 talent. But here's why Gaskin is the dark horse. He gets hot in the Pac-12 championship. He gets hot in his bowl game with another big game like he did in the Apple Cup. He goes to the Senior Bowl and dominates. He runs a good 40 time. If Gaskin can do all that and keep putting the pedal on the metal, I would not be surprised that Myles Gaskin pushes, potentially even surpasses Benny Snell's running back 1 in this class, because he is capable of doing it if he applies himself. And this is a guy we've both been very high on, Joey. I mean, he did not dominate versus Auburn like we thought he would at the beginning of the year, but he's gotten hot as of late. He had 1,300 yards as a freshman, 1,373 as a sophomore, 1,380 as a junior with 21 rushing touchdowns. And he did that without Trey Adams last year. He still exceeded 1,000 yards, even with every ounce of defense is stacking 8 in the box on him. He's still able to exceed 1,000 rushing yards without Trey Adams for 2 years in a row. And that's really impressive. So Myles Gaskin for me is the dark horse in this class, because if he can keep the momentum he had up, he had only 7 rushing touchdowns, but he had a huge game against Washington State to save face, knocked Washington State out of the Pac-12 championship and the playoff. So if he can build on that in the Pac-12 championship, build on that in the bowl game, build on that in the Senior Bowl because he's a senior, and then have a good combine, I think he actually could surpass Benny Snell. I just think the running back class is that wide open this year. I don't think there's an elite guy, but I think Gaskin could be the dark horse who has a say in what happens.
My thought is if he breaks through the line and you throw an ambrosia at him and it smashes against his helmet, will he get up? If, for those of you who don't know, ambrosia is a big apple. Yeah, if we're going to do an apple cup, there are no apples involved. If he breaks that line, will he get up if you smash him over the head with an ambrosia? If he doesn't get up, he's not your quarterback. He's not your running back. He can't do it. So the big test for him is going to be, can he get up if you smash him over the head with an ambrosia?
Well, he's never had any concussions mentally, so he checks out in that regard, so that's promising.
Well, the ambrosia can change that.
Yeah, the ambrosia could change that. You could definitively make that argument for any prospect, though. But he's lost weight. Like, he was 5'10", 200 pounds last year. He's 193.
In the Apple Cup. I mean, somebody who plays in the Apple Cup, though, I mean, yeah, you may be able to make that, but he played in the Apple Cup, so we can smash him with ambrosia. The big thing, though, for me is, okay, you know, it's like he's got skills. You know, I want to see him catch the ball more, because we know he's got the running skills. We know he's got the speed. We know he's got all that. I want to see him catch the ball more. You know, because, I mean, look at his quarterback. That's, for him, he's going to have to prove to be number one in this class. He's going to have to prove that he is a Marshall Faulk type. Elite pass catcher out of the backfield. And great runner. Doesn't have to be an elite runner. Marshall Faulk was not an elite runner. He was a great runner, not an elite runner. But he could get 2,000 all-purpose yards a year because he was a great pass catcher. So he was elite pass catching out of the backfield. That's what Gaskin's going to have to do to be number one. He's going to have to be that all-around great back.
I still think he has a window of opportunity to correct that, because I don't think anyone's run away with the running back one in this class yet.
No, they haven't.
So I think the window of opportunity for Gaskin to be that running back is there. As crazy as it sounds, I think that's there. You could make that argument, though, for anyone in the top 5. It's going to depend on who gets the Senior Bowl invites.
I think he has the potential to do it, but will he do it? Well, look at who his quarterback is, and then you can make your own decision on that one.
This running back class is like the Kentucky Derby. It's like picking horses, honestly. You have to – it's that wide open. It feels like you're picking horses.
You're more like picking donkeys, but, I mean, it still works. I'm sure Eeyore would be a good judge.
Yeah, and we're about to get to the Alabama running back, Damian Harris. I'd love to hear Curb's input on this when he calls into the show. So Damian Harris, 5'11", 215. He's complimenting other Alabama running backs on this roster, but he was the #1 running back when they had Bo Scarborough last year. And Alabama's got a lot of running backs that are talented. You're looking at north-south runner, good vision, very elusive, runs with a lot of power and intensity. He's faster than Bo Scarborough. Doesn't wow you with spins, jukes, stiff arms. Not the pass blocker you'd like to be, but I think Damian Harris, I do like him more than Bo Scarborough. I don't think his durability concerns are as severe. Now, if his speed is not as fast or if he's slower than Bo Scarborough, runs a bad 40, then there's other questions you can add into the equation. But he had 100 rushing yards versus LSU. And Devin White did play in the second half of that game. So he did have an impressive game versus LSU, which is why I have him at number 6 on my rankings, even though I put a lot of stock into that 100-yard game versus LSU. Maybe that was a mistake on my end, but I do think Damian Harris, his resume as a running back for Alabama is compelling enough to warrant a top 100 grade.
Well, here's the thing. This is where you really start getting drop off. You know, you get a lot of potential in the first few. Now you're getting to the second tier of, they might be decent depth players. And this is your typical thing. Comes from a big program, comes from a great program, comes from an NFL-ready program, very productive in that program, doesn't show any potential to be elite. Shows potential to be good, no potential to be elite. And if you're going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds, you've got to show potential to be elite. And he doesn't.
That's why I think he's a day 2, day 3 pick in the top 100 range, not a day 1 or day 2 talent. He could be a 3rd or 4th rounder, but I don't think he's in that top 5. Like, this is where the drop-off begins to take its toll after the top 5. Then at number 7, you've got number 2 Pitt running backs, Darren Hall and Quadri Olison. Olison gets more carries, but Hall has higher ceiling. Hall does more on tape. Hall, even though he has less carries, he's like the Alvin Kamara to Olison's Jalen Hurd, if we're being technical. He's the Sonny Michel to the Nick Chubb. Whatever. Point is, Darren Hall out of Pittsburgh. The guy reminds me of Alvin Kamara coming out of the draft 2 years ago. Sometimes he'll run into the teammates or defenders. He runs with a lot of force, which can be an asset if he gets separation, but it can also be detrimental if he collides with a defender. I don't see any major weaknesses with Hall. He reminds me of Kamara and Sonny Michel. It's hard to say where he goes at this point. Hall is an elusive, shifty runner. You can argue his ceiling's limited, but he did not get as much carries as Olison, yet his tape is better. So Hall and Olison, they're both 7-8.
If you want to make that comparison to Sonny Michel, let's make a comparison between Michel as a pro and Chubb as a pro. Chubb is Pro Football Focus's #1 running back in the NFL right now. Where's Michel? And
we had Nick Chubb ahead of Sonny Michel, but the Patriots decided to whiff on Sonny Michel in the first round. Both of us had Nick Chubb ahead in our rankings, in our running back rankings for the draft. We both had a higher grade on Nick Chubb than we did Sonny Michel. You remember the draft schedule. I was just like alarmist mode that day, but
yeah, so if Sonny Michel, if he's the Sonny Michel, it's like, are you saying he's going to be overdrafted and turned into a shell of what the other guy is going to be?
Well, Olison's 6'2", 225.
Yeah.
And Darren Hall is 5'11", 215. 225. 5'11", 225. So they're both pretty big running backs. But I see more upside with Darren Hall, and I even did a film cut for Darren Hall. So I've done multiple film cuts for Hall and Olison. Olison might be a fullback. Like, there's people saying Olison's got experience at running back and fullback, but Hall is more explosive.
Yeah,
I've got an 85 grade on both players, but that means they're borderline starters. I don't really see that high ceiling. After Myles Gaskin, you can tell there's a drop-off, and the rest of these running backs are probably looking at backup roles because if there's 5 teams, the Bills, the Jets, the 49ers, the Buccaneers, the Eagles, and one other team that needs a running back, the Jets, I think it is, or the Raiders, because Lynch and Martin are free agents. There's like 5 or 6 teams that need running backs, and after that, the drop-off begins to take its toll. The running back market is very thin, and if one of those 5 or 6 teams ignores running back in this draft, they can wait until the 2020 draft because that running back draft is actually stronger class than this one. So there's going to be a lot of strategy involved with the running backs in the next 2 drafts. How teams are going to manage their running back situations is really going to be intriguing moving forward because you're starting to see teams go back to game manager mode. Instead of having the QBs try to throw for 3,500 passing yards, with the depth teams have it running back now, with the competition teams have it running back, you're starting to see that 2-back set. More teams apply that. More teams run balanced, play it safe offenses rather than teams trying to get their quarterback 300 yards and air it out every week. And you're seeing quarterbacks play smarter too, like make better decisions. So you're seeing that consistently in the NFL now. Anything you'd like to add with these 2 Pitt running backs before we get to number 9? This guy from Memphis, Daryl Henderson, he's the best running back Memphis has had since D'Angelo Williams. And he leads the nation in rushing yards, as it is. But he's 5'9", 200. He's a guy who could surge up the boards. One of the people in views from the 22 said they saw this kid in high school. They knew he was a future pro prospect. So superb vision. He knows how to cut on tape. He can catch out of the backfield. Daryl Williams is my favorite running back to come out of Memphis since D'Angelo Williams. He's a junior, but if he declares, has an impressive combine, he's someone who could surge up the boards. He's a 3-down running back, high football IQ. He needs to improve in pass protection, but I think he's a 4th-round guy, but he's someone who could surge up the boards. I mean, he's probably the biggest gem on day 3 that nobody's talking about. What are your thoughts about this guy? He's not Anthony Miller, but he's leads the nation in rushing yards.
I like him, but I'm having to wonder what I'm having to wonder what his thought process is with not really thought process. I'm having to think of what effect that offense has on him because he's always had good quarterbacks, good receivers.
Sort of an air raid offense. So is he a product of the offense, or is he actually as good as advertised on tape? That's what I'm wondering as well.
Pretty much. Yeah, because that is, he comes from a offense like Memphis has. It's like, with a quarterback, you can kind of tell because you just have to look at him and say, okay, but he doesn't do this. Well, he does do this, but he just doesn't do it that often. Can he do this? Yeah, he can, but he just doesn't do it that often. And things like that. With a running back, it's more like, okay, is it because they're opening up to where they can't put more than 4 to 5 guys in the box? Or is it because he actually has all that skill? I mean, you can measure physical intangibles, but the rest, it makes it difficult to ascertain what he can do in other areas. It's like with Anderson, he's got those, 3/4 of the offensive linemen that are going to be taken in the first 3 rounds are his offensive linemen. So that's what I'm saying. Does he have that burst? Does he have that second level burst? Is he, can he get around the corner, or is it just because his offensive linemen have made a big freaking hole in that corner? Anderson's ability, and I also question Anderson's vision because of that. And I can say the same about him over there in Memphis. Because, I mean, you've got to question these things because does he look like he's going a little bit faster because, hey, who's in his way? He feels like he can just, he's got this 3-yard head start, but by the time he gets to the line of scrimmage, he's like, ooh, I can get through that. So, yeah, it's like the supporting cast, because they spread it out, why is he getting so many yards a pop? Is he not getting hit until he gets to 4 yards downfield? So these are things that are going to have games.
Yeah, there are things he needs to correct, but I think Daryl Henderson's a guy to keep an eye on. And another guy to keep an eye on at Mark Suba thinks is a top running back in the draft is Dexter Williams at Notre Dame. 5'11", 215. He suffered a 4-game suspension at the beginning of the year, but he's got the vision. He's got the ball carrot pie football IQ. He had 200 rushing yards versus Florida State. Only 1-year starter, but he had 200 rushing yards versus Florida State. He came in and replaced Josh Adams. And he's a guy that I like. I like him more than Josh Adams, okay? This guy is better than Josh Adams when I watch the tape. And he's playing with a much worse offensive line than Josh Adams had. I mean, Josh Adams did not have an offensive line this good at Notre Dame. So that's my argument for Dexter Williams. And if he can hit 100 yards on Clemson's offensive line in the college football playoff, his stock is going to go up. Like, if he gets 100 yards versus Clemson or Alabama, Dexter Williams' stock's just going to freaking skyrocket.
As a character and ball carrier vision, in my thinking, he can show that, he can be taken. It's like, why was Nick Chubb taken in round 2? Because he was patient, and as he's proven, since he's been with the Browns, is this guy's got some great vision. He probably had the best vision in the draft, and I don't really think too many people realize that. And that is, for me, it kind of changed the order of what you look for in a running back, because you really had to look at the ball carrying vision, as Chubb provided. Like, a lot of his yards, he leads the NFL in yards after contact, 5.6, because when he first gets contact, he's got the vision, and he's already making his move by the time they contact him. And if you're mid-move when you get contacted, your momentum's going to take you on past that. So, if you got that anticipatory vision, then that is something special. So I'm going to have to look at if he has most of the physical skills you need, but I want to see that vision come into play. And he's one of these guys who can skyrocket up to the number 1 position from the number 10 or 11 position, simply because he's got the skill, but does he have the vision? Is he like the man before him over in Memphis? Is he a product of that system? If he shows during the college football playoff that he has the vision to get these yards against top-tier teams and find these holes quickly, then he's going to skyrocket up more. Because he hasn't played as tough a competition as if he would have if he played for, say, Alabama or Ohio State. We've already documented their strength schedules. So, not Alabama as much. They haven't had as strong strength schedule as Ohio State, I don't believe. But if he plays somewhere like Ohio State, he would have had a strong strength schedule. And we would have been able to see that vision a little bit more. So the vision for me, and the balance will come along with seeing the vision, because like Chubb, they say, oh, he's got great balance. Well, yeah, we wouldn't have known that if he didn't have such great vision to be able to make these anticipatory cuts and everything. We wouldn't have known if he had these vision. had that balance. So if he can show these things that go together, then he has the ability to skyrocket. And just for note,
I'm a huge fan of Dexter Williams. I think he could be great, but there's also things he's got to work on. So what was the quick note you were going to get to before we get to number 11, a running back who's just taken a huge tumble on the boards?
Well, like, I know it seems like I use Nick Chubb as a benchmark of sorts, but even though he wasn't my number one running back as far as somebody who was going to get drafted and overall skill, as far as a runner, he was my number one running back last year, and probably my favorite running back over the last 2 or 3 years. So, I don't think that I'm just spouting him off because he's a member of the Browns. This is a guy, if you look back in the podcast over the last couple of years, I have been...
He was dominating when Todd Gurley got injured. He just stepped in when Todd Gurley was injured and was the man, like his freshman year.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Todd Gurley said Nick Chubb was better than he was in college. He said before Nick Chubb's injury, he was better than Todd Gurley. This is coming from Todd Gurley. Okay? So if people are saying, oh, he's just comparing everybody to Todd Gurley because he's with the Browns, but no, Todd Gurley was actually that good. Todd Gurley is the most complete running back, as far as running goes in this draft. And it wasn't even close. Saquon Barkley got the edge because he was a great pass catcher. Okay, he could do a lot of things after pitching that pass. And he could drag up our purple sharks like nobody does. As far as true running goes, Nick Chubb was light years beyond Saquon Barkley. Nick Chubb is probably better as a pure runner than Todd Gurley. And Todd Gurley pretty much acknowledged that a couple years ago. He is a better pure player, a better pure runner. And that's something a lot of people ignore. So if I compare these guys, any part of their game, whether it's something they need to work on or something that they are good at to Nick Chubb, it's because for me, as a runner, Nick Chubb is probably the best running back to come out in the last few years. And everything he's doing in the professionals right now in the NFL, that brings everything I've said about him, everything Todd Gurley said about him, everything the Georgia coaching staff said about him, it validates it. Number one in Pro Football Focus in almost every category for a running back, with the exception of pass catching. Okay, that, the highest grade for Pro Football Focus. He has played about, 4 full games, and he has almost 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. Okay, so yeah, if I compare anything on these guys to Nick Chubb, make no mistake, it's not because he's a Brown, it's because Nick Chubb's that damn good. And he has been for a long time.
Yep. And number 11 is Bryce Love. This is a guy who was number 1 heading into this season, first rounder heading into the season. He's only had 665 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. I have a 5th round grade on Bryce Love. This guy had 2,100 rushing yards and 19 rushing touchdowns, replacing Christian McCaffrey. But his production has declined. He's not as fast on tape it's really underwhelming because Bryce Love, you could make an argument that Bryce Love is the biggest bear in this draft. We did a Bears and Bulls show on the podcast 2 weeks ago, but you can make an argument that Bryce Love is the biggest bear in the 2019 NFL draft because he's not physical enough. You want to see him put on more muscle. It's like Bryce Love cost himself more money than anyone else.
Or if you are draft eligible and you have had a monster season against strong competition, I don't care that you love your team. I don't care that you won a championship. You're talking about a $20 million swing in contract if you don't get at least, you have a 2,000, you better get at least 1,500. You're looking at 5 to 10, maybe even $15 million swing in salary in guaranteed money. Bryce Love is the poster child for get your ass up, declare for the draft, because your life just got, even as a professional player, you had to realize these guys are the guys that a lot of people make 100-some thousand a year, 500,000 a year. I could live comfortably off that and get all my retirement, all my savings, everything taken care of. A lot of guys go bankrupt on that. Because they're like, ooh, I'm rich. Especially young guys. $15 million. There are very few people overall, very few millionaires with that much money that go bankrupt. Will Smith did it. He was on the edge of bankruptcy. He was broke. Donald Trump, he's had he's blown $416 million that his dad gave him. I mean, he's had 6 bankruptcies. He's done it. Will Smith and Donald Trump, and a few NFL players. I mean, I know there's a couple quarterbacks. I think Jamarcus Russell's on the brink. And that was a $60 million contract or something like that. Other than them, there aren't that many people that can blow that type of money. Maybe a rapper or two. I've heard there are some rappers out there that spend extravagantly on gold and cars. At least the old ones did back in the 80s. I mean, that was pretty much the thing then. But other than that, there aren't that many people and percentage of millionaires that can blow that type of money. There are a lot of people that can blow $500 million. So Bryce Love is probably, he just made his life a lot harder. He is the poster child of, you have a 2,000-yard season as a running back, you get your ass into the draft. Do not hesitate, or it will go wrong.
Yep, I agree. Bryce Love had to pull the trigger, had to declare for the draft, and he didn't. So that ended up working against him. And honestly, Bryce Love, if he can get a Senior Bowl invite, that's great. But he lost a lot of money by not declaring for the draft. I mean, unless he can get like 345 rushing yards against Cal, and then whatever Stanford does in the bowl game, like he's got to have 200-yard games on the ground just to regain momentum. That's how bad of a fall Bryce Love has taken. He's got to have 200-yard games to end the year just to get back on the right foot. And Joey might make the argument he needs 300-yard games.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to put out, and yes, this is because I follow the Browns, so bear with me. Rashard Hollywood Higgins. Big college star, attitude problems. Went to the NFL, thought he was tough shit. Thought he was the next coming of Larry Fitzgerald, Terrell Owens, next great star. Well, gets cut in training camp. The last cut for the Browns. They bring him back on the practice squad. He makes the roster later on. Comes back this year. He said, I thought I was the greatest thing ever. Getting cut was shocking. It was eye-opening. It was, and this year, here's a stat for you. Cleveland is 0-3 with Rashard Higgins out of the lineup. When Higgins plays, he has shown enough threat to draw the defenses. The Browns are 3 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie. The Browns cannot win without Higgins in the lineup. Higgins said the reason that he applied himself and became what a lot of people said the hardest recruit on the Browns roster is because he got cut. It was an eye-opener. What if Bryce Love, 2,000 yards, 2 straight, I think it was 2,002 straight years or somewhere around there, said, Dad, I've got it made. I'm great. Comes out, lays a goose egg, just like Higgins did in his rookie year. Laid a goose egg. And now he's going to drop in the draft. Day 3 pick, 3rd round pick. How humbling would that be? Aaron Rodgers, he said, at one time, I was arrogant when I came out of the draft. I thought I was the greatest thing ever. I fell to the 23rd pick, and I backed up Brett Favre for 3 years. A humbling experience. They have an emerging receiver for the youngest team in the NFL, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the game. Both of them saying, 2 different generations, 2 different teams, 2 different situations. They're both saying, I had to be humbled. I had to be humbled. It took tumbling in the draft, or it took them cutting me. Let's go back further. Chris Carter, he said his drug problems were so bad, it took the Eagles cutting me. I thought I could do anything I wanted because I was the star of the Eagles. It took the Eagles cutting Chris Carter before Carter said, you cut me? It took that to get him straightened around. If he had to sign with the Vikings for less than he probably would have made with the Eagles for his first contract with them because of his problems. He had to be humbled. Bryce Love, I think he's going to find out this might be a case of, I thought I was something special. I listened to the hype. I thought I was something special. And I think this draft is probably going to show him he's probably going to be really disappointed in how this turns out because he thought he was something special. I think that might be something that is going on right now with Bryce Love.
I agree. Bryce Love does have some strong qualities, but he also has some things he needs to work on. I gave him an 84 for potential grade. It's really underwhelming how his stock's fallen. A guy who's pulled everything together, reminds me of Peyton Hillis, is A.J. Roulette from Ohio, a Maction guy. 5'10", 195, but he looks like he's 6'3", 240. Like, he looks like he's bigger than his height. And he's a film junkie, watched a lot of film. He's very dedicated to – I know Javon Hagan praised Roulette when we had him on the show last year, so Roulette runs with a lot of power. He's the 3-time captain. His learning rate, his intangibles, his pass protection. He's improved as a pass catcher. He's not a 3-down back. You'd like to see him develop more speed, more elusiveness. I have a 6th-round grade on him. I love him as a change of pace back. I don't think he's a starter, but I think he can be a very good change of pace back. And I don't think he's a guy who's going to end up in the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to end up in the Shrine Game or the Collegiate Bowl, if I had to say. I'd love to see him in Mobile, but there's no film on Roulette yet, and I get a Shrine Game Collegiate Bowl vibe with Roulette more so than a Senior Bowl vibe, even though you could argue he's worthy of a Senior Bowl invite.
Well, here's something that I'm going to blow. I know there are people going to blow a gasket when they hear this and I say it. People say, but you can't teach speed. Bullshit. Here's the thing. From my sophomore year, well, this is going into my sophomore year, my freshman year, tore my hamstring off the bone. Tore it off the bottom of the knee. Here's the thing. When I was rehabbing, I had never run a 40 below 5'4". I worked with 2 college, 2 guys from our high school, former teammates, who graduated who graduated that summer, came back to train. I just happened to be there running, rehabbing my knee. I trained with them. I've never run faster than a 4.42, 4.43. I was 240 pounds. I trained with them. I ran a 4.9. I ran a 4.9. 240-pound offensive lineman. Had never run under a 5'4". You can teach speed. Not always the easiest thing to teach. You can do it. So, if everybody's saying, well, we got to question his speed, is he fast enough? Can we make him faster? Yes, you can make him faster. The question is, do you want to put the time in to do it? It took me almost 2 months to shave 0.5 seconds off my 40. And I had to do it by practicing as a sophomore in high school with college athletes. So, I'm going to tell you right now, it is possible. It is doable. The thing is, do you want to put in the time? Do you want to put in the effort? Do you want to put in the training? Because I can guarantee you, a couple hours a day doing that shit, it ain't easy. It's not easy. We'll get the results, but it's going to take time, and it ain't easy. Not by motion. And the conditions, sometimes, hey, I was doing it on blacktop, and it was 90 degrees out on summer days. Okay? We ran a mile, 2 miles, just to warm up. And I had to keep up with them. I wasn't a fast dude. These guys, one was a track star in high school. Went to the States. I had to keep up. So, another part of that, get yourself a partner that is not just better than you, but is light years ahead of you. That you're here on Earth, and you've got to catch up to that guy over there on Jupiter. Get somebody like that, and force yourself. Keep it. It can be done. May not like it. Maybe the worst thing you have ever done in your life. But you can do it. It can be done. I didn't get down to that 4.4 that they were running. You know, 7.5 off 40. my technique on the 40 sucks. I know how to get the technique, but it sucks. It looks awkward, and I still shave 0.5 off. Okay, when I started running 5Ks, I was running at about 34 minutes. At my best, I was at 23 and a half. You can teach speed. Guaranteed it. Been there, done that. So, do not discount it. Discount that these people may not have what it takes to get it done. But it's mainly mental and internal. You listen to these people say, you can't teach that, can't teach that, can't teach that. No matter how much you try, it's going to be in your head, you can't teach that. And then it's over before it ever begins. But yes, you can teach speed. I want to make that one clear.
Yeah, but a lot of people say you can't teach speed. I believe you can teach it, but a lot of people say you can't teach it. And, like, we're the outcasts of Lombardi's Draft Talk because everyone believes speed cannot be taught.
Well, you know what? The only thing I'll tell them is, hey, look at my resume. I did it. Are you saying that I am this?
I used to be, like, really slow. I could only do, like, a 100-yard dash in 14 seconds. Now I can do a 100-yard dash in 11 seconds. So speed can be conditioned. I did track when I was younger, but yeah, go on.
You know why I'm still not as bad in 40s as I was? Because I've got about 20 pounds more upper body muscle, for one. Two, I've got another 5 pounds worth of beer and chimichangas in my stomach on a daily basis. Okay? So am I going to run the same 40 I did 5 years ago in 23 minutes? Hell no. I can guarantee I run once or twice a month. Still outrun that average, NFL player. Why? Because I believe speed can be taught. If I wanted to, I'd get back into 40 shape. I'm still running a 30-minute 40, or I'm still running a 30-minute 5K. I'll get back into 40 shape too. And I'll run a 5.4640. So these NFL prospects, how it's done. Why? Because I know how. Because I can. Because it can be taught. It can be done. Doesn't matter if you like it or not. It is what it is. You can do it if you want to.
If you believe you can do it, you can do it. That's a very powerful message, very empowering message from Joseph Potter. And the next running back we're going to get to is Jordan Scarlett from Florida. His nickname is Beast Mode Jr. He actually has dreadlocks like Marshawn Lynch, but his actual nickname is Beast Mode Jr. That's Jordan Scarlett's nickname. He knows how to attack the hole. Can run inside or outside. Poor vision. I mean, he only has 707 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, but Mark loves the way he runs, so he's thinking, well, he's a day 2 pick. He might get reached for, but when you take a guy who only has 4 rushing touchdowns on 122 carries in the 3rd round, it usually does not end up well. And a lot of his good tape from 2016 was when he had David Sharp and Martez Ivey as his bookend tackles. Ever since David Sharp left, he's relied a lot on Martez Ivey, and he just hasn't been the same player. So, while Scarlett's talented, but this is what we thought of Antonio Callaway, and Callaway surprised us. He didn't shine in college, but he shined in the NFL. So, you never know with these Florida Gators. This guy could surprise us.
Well, the thing is with Antonio Callaway would be thriving right now. Except for Antonio Callaway only catches about 50% of his passes. Okay? You throw it to Antonio Callaway, there's a 50 chance, he's going to drop it. It's going to go right in his hands. And it's going to go through his hands to the ground. He has dropped 3 touchdowns from Baker Mayfield this year. They were right in his hands. Just done, drop. Just had his guy beat perfect route. Had his guy beat by 3 yards without running him. Drop a dime right in his hands. Robbed it. So, yes, Antonio Callaway would be driving in the NFL. But right now, he's barely got more catches than the aforementioned Rashard Higgins. Higgins only has 20. And why is that? Because Higgins missed 3 games. But I can guarantee you, right now, he can catch the ball. He'd be the best receiver on that Browns team. So, Florida guys, out of all the Florida receivers that have come out over the last, I'd say, 12 years, I'd say Callaway has the most potential. Callaway can be the biggest star. He can be one of the best receivers in the NFL. Callaway can't catch a goddamn football. Yes, you never know about these Florida receivers. But even the good ones, for some reason, have that fatal flaw. Every damn one. Some of them are fast, can catch great, couldn't run around if their life depended on it. Others on perfect routes have no speed. Callaway has everything you need to be the best receiver in the NFL. He's got speed, he's got natural route running. The most Browns coaches said the most natural route runner on that team. Can't catch a flipping football to save his life. So, I mean, Florida receivers, you want to mention Callaway for Florida receivers, let's put another one in there. Probably the most explosive receiver of our generation. Couldn't run a route to save his life. Percy Harvin. Guy was so explosive. I mean, he was exciting. You get him running down the sideline, you can throw the ball as far as you want. He was the reincarnation of Randy Moss on long balls. He could run reverses. He could get 25 yards a pop. You ask him to run something as simple as a slant. What? What's a slant? He had no clue. Who's he lost? Couldn't run around to save his life. Not in the NFL anymore, is he? Between concussions and not being able to run around to save his life, he's out of the NFL. So, Florida receivers always have one fatal flaw. They cannot coach a complete receiver. Their life depended on it. They coach good receivers. They cannot coach a complete receiver. It is just not their makeup. Can't do it.
Yep. Jordan Scarlett, he's got some talent, so I think he's someone to keep an eye on. The 14th player on my rankings is a only Senior Bowl invite at the moment, Jalen Moore out of Appalachian State. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2016 and 2017, only had 400 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns before an injury.
Real quick, I want to say I apologize to Chris Erbos because I know we're talking about running backs, but you mentioned Antonio Callaway, Florida wide receivers, and flaws. It's like, we are just, this is like that's something to open a floodgate for any conversation if you put those two things together. And you can go back in the history, and so that was just one of those things. I apologize. A little off track on that.
Yeah, we like to have fun, make a few pop culture references, but we get back on track. We keep the ball rolling. We stay focused. I do it sometimes myself. I'm guilty on it on more occasions than Joey, so it's all good. But look at Jalen Moore out of Appalachian State. He had over 100 total yards versus Penn State, and Appalachian State almost beat Penn State in the opener. when Jalen Moore was healthy. So Jalen Moore, while he dropped some passes, his pass protection needs improvement. Jalen Moore did have some good moments on tape versus Penn State. And Jalen Moore is one of these players where I have a 7th-round grade on him right now, but if he goes into Mobile and just dominates, he could end up being a 3rd-rounder. So Jalen Moore is a player to keep an eye on. He needs to add more muscle, but he can be effective. I have an 80 grade on him out of 99, but I have a 7th-round grade on him because I see him as a backup. Maybe I'm being too lenient, but as like with Jalen Moore, and then you've got Mike Weber out of Ohio State, who's a number 2 back. He had 96 yards versus Michigan, but he's a number 2 back to J.K. Dobbins. So that's why he ended my list at 15, because he's a number 2 back, and I just felt like that makes him the least effective running back in the draft. But what are your thoughts on Jalen Moore and Mike Weber before we wrap this up? We can try to do some picks really quickly before we wrap up the show on TalkShoe. But before we wrap up this Google Hangout, what are your thoughts on Jalen Moore and Mike Weber?
Well, Mike Weber is, I don't have many thoughts on Moore. Weber is, I'm wondering if he is a product of that big play Ohio State offense, because something we saw in Michigan yesterday, I watched the first hour of that game. Michigan was playing back, looking for the big play. Ohio went underneath. Ohio State just went underneath. And they got huge chunky yards, for running after the catch. And that, I just wonder, is that throwing deep, that big play ability, the reason that he's getting those yards and then backing everything up, or, is he the real deal? So that's something he's going to have to answer.
All right, so Mike Weber, that'll wrap up the running back rankings. Thank you guys so much. We'll be back next week, the wide receiver rankings. I've already uploaded a photo of the 3 wide receivers with N'Keal Harry, Dylan Mitchell, and Anthony Johnson of the Draftutopia server this morning. I was going to try to actually code some of that during the show, but I'm glad I didn't, because I was going to multitask on the new iPad, but I